I'm in a new part of the studios here at the Future Academy. And I just assembled this library with a lot of books that are dear to me. This is about 1/3 of all the books that I have. I know it's a bit sick, but I've been reading for a long time. So I think I have about 600-700 books here. And I wanted you to play a little game with me. I wanted you to, if I show you some books, and if we choose the topic of brand building, I want to hear what you're reading, what you'd like to read, some of your favorite books, and I'll share a few of mine just to give you something to read whenever you have the chance over the holidays. Perhaps you're in the US and it's Thanksgiving, or just for the end of the year as you prep for the next year. If you want to learn strategic brand building, especially if you want to be a brand consultant, I believe that you need to understand kind of basic business stuff and strategy. And some of you are going to think like that's way different from, if you're a designer, for example, or you're working in the creative fields, how does that connect to what you do? Well, building brands and guiding people through the whole brand building process essentially comes down to looking at the big picture, solving bigger problems. And so to be able to charge more as a brand consultant and have more impact, you need to start with the classics. So Peter Drucker, absolutely. Here's Gary Hamel. I don't know if you can see that, by the way. These are epic books. So Peter Drucker, but also Michael Porter. Don't forget him. He wrote these classics, and that will teach you really about business and strategy. And speaking of Michael Porter, he kind of talks about positioning, which is interesting because Al Ries and Jack Trout, who wrote the book on positioning, it's somewhere here, they claim that they came up with the term, and perhaps they did, I don't know. But Michael Porter, he talks about strategy as essentially being about positioning. So he's kind of a brand guy, I believe. So anyways, you got to read those people. Here's another one, Michael Porter. He was an early pioneer in the game of strategic brand building, and perhaps even without knowing it, because he didn't really use the term, but he was very customer focused. He was very much teaching the principles that we've come to know as brand building today. And so he used, he claimed that the two most important functions of a business is innovation and marketing. And put those together kind of sounds like brand building to me. Of course, I have to mention my friend, mentor. I'm the biggest fan in the world of Martin Neumeyer. I think most of these books are actually signed by him. I've had him over for some seminars, for some workshops. He's been on the podcast, by the way, if you haven't listened to that. Everything he writes is beautiful. It's poetry to me because it's so simple. He writes like a designer. Of course, he is a designer. So, look at his books. They are kind of thin, big font, and he delivers much more than some of the authors of the big, thick business books that you'll never read. There's so much gold in his books. Another guy who was on the podcast, by the way, so you can see this, David Breer. This book here, I'm holding the camera so I can't really take it out and show it to you, but it's like big font, very simple, only principles. Also a very good book. It doesn't fill it with a lot of story and stuff. Maybe you like the stories, but sometimes I feel like I've read them all by now. So yeah, I want to hear from you. What are some of your favorite books on brand building? It could be that you go into, the other parts of brand building like innovation or design, whatever that you like. I'd love to hear what that is. Let me see if I can pick something else out. Denise Leon, she's been on the Extraordinary Podcast, had her, and this is a great book. She has another one called Fusion, her latest book, which is great. And Tilt, another really great book. Martin Neumeyer, in fact, told me that this was one of the books that influenced him as he wrote the brand Flip, which is another great book. Let's see, another book that has been influencing me a lot in all my methodology, everything I do, is the 80-20 Principle. Richard Koch, I guess it's safer to say. I don't know how to pronounce his name. He just came out with a new book, by the way. I got it last week, and I've read like 2/3 of it. It's really great. I don't exactly remember what it's called. I'm gonna put that in the comments. Let's see, what else do we got here? Well, if you're into design research, if you're into understanding customers really well, then John Kolko, very good book on empathy, on the whole process of understanding customers, doing synthesis, synthesizing for insights, framing for opportunities, that kind of stuff. And yeah, I gotta mention Wally Ollins. Of course, he passed away, I think in 2014, just the same year as this book came out. One of my favorite books. Also, anything by Roger Martin. I'm a big fan of Roger Martin. Actually, here's one of his books that I feel should be mandatory reading for, I don't know, everyone. I spoke to Roger once. I met him at a seminar, and he said this didn't sell that well, but I think he agreed that this is like, it's one of those books that should go down in history. Epic, epic stuff. Speaking of which, of epic, I have to mention another friend of mine. Also, I've had him over for workshops. It's been on twice on the podcast. The Experience Economy with Joe Pine. Well, everything by him. Infinite Possibility, Authenticity. He has other books as well. Great, great stuff. Influenced my thinking like a lot. So let's see. The fifth discipline, that's about systems design. And of course, Thinking in Systems, another great book, which you might know. Brand Simple. This is a few years old, but it's great. Alan also been on the podcast. If you haven't listened to the podcast, we've got some epic content on the podcast. I'm not referring to myself, I'm referring to all the wonderful guests that I've had on the show. So want to check that out, thefutureacademy.com/extraordinary. And yeah, well, I could go on for hours. As you can see, I'm so passionate about reading, so passionate about learning, about brand building, entrepreneurship, personal growth. But I'm gonna have to make a few more videos to go through this stuff more in detail. Oh, I have to mention one more thing. Douglas Holt and Cultural Strategy. He also wrote a book called How Brands Become Icons, I think it's called, which is based in similar theories, but it's an epic book, especially if you want to understand how these big ideas behind brands like Jack Daniels, Nike, Patagonia, like you name it, they are basically extracted from culture. And he has a model for how to do that, and it's really, really eye-opening. You realize that companies aren't necessarily building brands, or like they're basically tapping into something that already exists, and he has a model for doing that, so that's brilliant. Anyways, I can't look that way because there's so many good books I want to talk about. But anyways, I want to hear what are some of your favorite books, and if you have any comments, if you want to share something in here, great. Just leave some comments and let's carry on the conversation. Be safe and talk to you soon.